My name is Claire. I've been thinking about this moment for a long time, sitting here, staring at the blank screen, trying to figure out where to even begin. It's not easy to talk about your life when it feels like someone else has been writing half of it for you. But if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that sometimes you have to take back control of the narrative before it swallows you whole. Let me start by telling you who I am, or at least who I used to be. I'm just an ordinary person, really. Someone who believed in hard work, loyalty, and doing what was right. For nearly a decade, I gave everything I had to my job, pouring my heart into projects that made other people look good. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. That slow unraveling. The way they took pieces of me until there wasn't much left. It all started 10 years ago when I landed my dream job at Crestline Media, one of those big-name companies everyone wants to work for, but few actually get into. Back then, I was fresh out of college with stars in my eyes and more ambition than wisdom. I remember walking through those glass doors on my first day, clutching my notebook so tightly my knuckles turned white. The office buzzed with energy, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people rushing past with coffees in hand. It felt alive, electric, like anything could happen. That's when I met her, Rachel Bennett, the VP of Creative Development. She was sharp, polished, intimidatingly smart, the kind of woman who commanded attention without even trying. At first, I idolized her. She seemed untouchable, larger than life, the epitome of success. When she called me into her office during my second week to ask me directly how I'd handle a major campaign we were pitching, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Here I was barely out of school and she wanted my opinion? Of course, I stammered through my answer. But she smiled anyway and said something I'll never forget. You've got potential, Claire. Don't waste it. Looking back now, I realize that might have been the moment things began to shift, when she decided I was useful enough to keep around but disposable enough to use. At the time, though, I was too green to notice, too eager to please. Over the next few months, I threw myself into every project she handed me, staying late, skipping lunches, answering emails at midnight because I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle it. I wanted to prove her right, to show her I wasn't wasting anything. And then came the first sign something wasn't quite right. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the faintest crack in a mirror you only notice when the light hits it just right. We were working on a huge campaign for a new client, a tech startup looking to make waves. I spent weeks researching their product, brainstorming ideas, and drafting presentations. I poured my soul into it, believing this would be my chance to shine. Finally, the day arrived for us to pitch. Rachel walked into the conference room, flanked by executives from both our company and theirs. As she clicked through slides, I watched in stunned silence as she presented my ideas, not as mine but as hers. At first, I told myself I must have misunderstood. Maybe I misheard or missed some crucial detail. After all, Rachel was brilliant. Surely, she'd come up with similar thoughts independently. But as the meeting went on, the truth became undeniable. She quoted lines verbatim from my notes, described strategies I'd outlined word for word. My stomach churned as realization sank in. She'd stolen my work. I didn't say anything, of course. What could I say? Who would believe me? And nobody in turn accusing the VP of plagiarism? Instead, I sat there quietly, forcing a smile, pretending everything was fine while inside I felt like screaming. That night, I cried in my car after leaving the office, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. Part of me wanted to quit right then and there, but another part, the stubborn, naive part, refused to give up. I convinced myself this was a one-time thing, a mistake born out of stress or oversight. Surely, Rachel wouldn't do it again, but she did. Over the next few years, it became a pattern. Every idea I pitched, every concept I developed, ended up being credited to her. It didn't matter how much effort I put in or how clearly original my contributions were. They disappeared under her name, like smoke vanishing into thin air. Meanwhile, she climbed higher and higher within the company, earning promotions, accolades, bonuses. And me? I stayed exactly where I was, buried beneath layers of invisibility. Still, I kept going. Not because I trusted Rachel anymore. I'd stopped trusting her a long time ago, but because I refused to let her win. If she thought she could break me, she was wrong. So I worked harder, smarter, faster. I documented every meeting, saved every email, archived every draft. I built a fortress of evidence, hoping someday it would be enough to protect me. Deep down, though, I knew it probably wouldn't matter. People like Rachel always found a way to stay on top, no matter what. Then, 2 years ago, something changed. Or rather, someone did. His name was Daniel, and he joined our team as a junior strategist. Unlike most newcomers, he didn't fall for Rachel's charm right away. He saw through her act almost immediately, picking up on little inconsistencies in her stories, noticing patterns I'd tried to ignore. One evening, after yet another meeting where Rachel blatantly passed off my work as her own, Daniel pulled me aside. "Claire," he said, his voice low but firm, "you know she's stealing from you, right?" I froze, caught between embarrassment and relief. "Yeah," I admitted finally. "I know." He nodded, as if he'd expected my answer. "You deserve better than this," he added. "Don't let her take everything from you." Those words stuck with me, echoing in my mind long after he walked away. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different future, one where I wasn't trapped in Rachel's shadow, where I could step into the spotlight and claim what was rightfully mine. But breaking free wouldn't be easy. In fact, it would require more courage than I'd ever shown before. Things escalated quickly after that conversation. With Daniel's encouragement, I started pushing back subtly, inserting myself into discussions where I'd previously stayed silent. I began presenting my ideas directly to clients instead of funneling them through Rachel. Slowly but surely, people started noticing. They complimented my creativity, praised my dedication. It felt strange at first, hearing positive feedback without Rachel hijacking the credit. Strange, but empowering. Of course, Rachel noticed too. Her once smooth demeanor cracked under the pressure of losing control. She grew colder, sharper, more critical. Meetings turned into interrogations, her questions laced with thinly veiled hostility. Still, I held my ground. I reminded myself why I was doing this, not just for revenge, but for justice, for closure, for proof that I mattered. And then, just when I thought I was finally gaining traction, she fired me. The termination came out of nowhere, or at least that's how it seemed. One morning, I arrived at the office to find Rachel waiting for me outside my cubicle. Her expression was unreadable, her tone clipped and formal. "We need to talk," she said simply, motioning toward the conference room. As soon as the door closed behind us, she launched into a rehearsed speech about budget cuts and restructuring, about how difficult this decision had been, about how grateful they were for my contributions over the years. Grateful. The word burned like acid in my ears. All I could think about was the countless hours I'd sacrificed, the sleepless nights, the dreams deferred, all for nothing. By the time she finished speaking, I was numb. Shocked, yes, but also strangely calm. This was it, the final blow. She thought she'd won, that firing me would erase any threat I posed. But she underestimated one crucial thing: resilience. Walking out of that building for the last time, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally lifted. Sure, anger bubbled beneath the surface, and fear lingered in the corners of my mind. The days following my dismissal were a blur of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was the raw sting of betrayal, the kind that settles in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I replayed every interaction with Rachel in my mind, dissecting moments I'd once dismissed as harmless or accidental. How had I missed the signs? Why hadn't I spoken up sooner? The questions gnawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. But on the other hand, there was clarity, a sharp, crystalline understanding that I couldn't go back to being the person I was before. Losing my job wasn't just an ending, it was a reckoning. For years, I'd let Rachel dictate the terms of my existence, shrinking myself to fit into the narrow space she allowed me. Now, for the first time, I saw an opportunity not to fight her game, but to change the rules entirely. I started small. First, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but tinged with concern. "Claire, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my voice wavered slightly. "Well, not fine exactly, but I will be." He listened patiently as I recounted what happened, offering words of encouragement without judgment. By the end of the call, he promised to keep an eye out for opportunities where I could channel my talents elsewhere. More importantly, he reminded me that I wasn't alone, that even in this dark moment, there were people who believed in me. That conversation gave me strength, enough to face the next step, confronting the fear of starting over. It's terrifying to leave behind something familiar, especially when you've built so much of your identity around it. But sitting at home, staring at the walls of my tiny apartment, I realized I didn't have a choice. Staying stuck would mean letting Rachel win, and I refused to give her that satisfaction. So I began reaching out to old contacts, former colleagues, anyone who might help me rebuild. Some ignored my messages. Others offered polite condolences without follow-through. But a few, bless them, took genuine interest. One such person was Mia, a former client who'd always appreciated my work. Over coffee, she listened intently as I explained my situation, nodding thoughtfully. "You know," she said after a pause, "there's a startup I've been advising. They're looking for someone with your skill set. Creative, strategic, unafraid to challenge the status quo." She smiled faintly. "If you're interested, I can put in a good word." Her offer felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. For the first time since losing my job, I dared to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. Still, rebuilding my career wasn't easy. Startups move fast, and expectations are sky high. Every day brought new challenges, long hours, tight deadlines, constant uncertainty. But unlike Crestline, this environment thrived on collaboration rather than competition. My ideas weren't stolen here, they were celebrated. Slowly, I began to rediscover the joy of creating, the thrill of seeing my vision come to life. And yet, no matter how busy I stayed, Rachel lingered in the back of my mind. Not because I hated her, though there were days when anger flared hot and bright, but because I knew our story wasn't finished. What she'd done to me wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Women like her operated in boardrooms across industries, crushing ambition under the guise of mentorship, exploiting loyalty while feigning ignorance. If I truly wanted closure, I needed to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for everyone else she might hurt in the future. The idea came to me late one night as I scrolled through social media. A post about workplace ethics caught my attention, sparking a thought. What if I shared my story publicly? Anonymous blogs and whistleblower accounts had become powerful tools in recent years, shining light on corporate misconduct and holding abusers accountable. Could I do the same? At first, the notion terrified me. Going public meant risking everything. My reputation, my privacy, any chance of reconciliation with former employers. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. About giving others the courage to speak up when they felt powerless. With Daniel's help, I started documenting everything. Emails, meeting notes, project timelines, all meticulously organized into folders labeled by date and incident. We combed through years' worth of material, piecing together a narrative that painted a damning picture of Rachel's behavior. Alongside the evidence, I wrote essays detailing my experiences, blending facts with emotion to create something both compelling and relatable. When we finally launched the blog, I held my breath, bracing for backlash. Instead, the response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from strangers sharing their own stories of workplace abuse, thanking me for speaking out. Journalists reached out, eager to amplify my voice. Even former colleagues contacted me privately, confirming suspicions they'd harbored for years but never voiced aloud. For the first time in my life, I felt unstoppable, empowered, like I was part of something bigger than myself. But Rachel noticed too. It started subtly, a terse email from HR at Crestline, asking me to cease publishing potentially defamatory content. Then came the legal threats, veiled warnings disguised as professional courtesy. Each attempt to silence me only fueled my resolve. I responded calmly, confidently, armed with the knowledge that truth was on my side. What happened next changed everything. One afternoon, as I prepared for a meeting with potential investors for the startup, my phone buzzed incessantly. Dozens of notifications lit up my screen, each one linking to the same headline: Crestline VP accused of systemic plagiarism and workplace abuse. My heart raced as I clicked through the articles. Major news outlets had picked up the story, citing anonymous sources within Crestline who corroborated my claims. Internal documents leaked, revealing patterns of misconduct stretching back years. And then the bombshell. Rachel had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. I sat there, stunned as reality sank in. After all these years, the woman who tried to erase me, was now facing consequences of her own making. Justice, slow and steady, had finally arrived. But as satisfying as that moment was, I knew it wasn't the end of the road. Exposing Rachel was just the beginning of a larger mission, one rooted in advocacy, education, and systemic change. Because while firing her might feel like victory, real progress required dismantling the structures that allowed people like her to thrive in the first place. In the weeks that followed, I found myself stepping into a role I'd never anticipated: activist. Invitations poured in from conferences, podcasts, panels, all eager to hear my perspective on workplace ethics and accountability. At first, I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to embrace this new identity. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how important it was to use my platform for good. Through it all, I kept thinking about the younger version of myself, the wide-eyed intern who walked into Crestline Media believing hard work alone would guarantee success. If I could reach even one person like her, warn them about the pitfalls ahead, maybe my struggles wouldn't have been in vain. As I write this now, months later, I still don't know what the future holds. Will Rachel return to power, rebranded and untouchable? Or will the system finally hold her accountable for her actions? Either way, I've learned to focus on what I can control: my voice, my values, my commitment to doing what's right. Because here's the thing about resilience: it doesn't mean avoiding pain or hardship. It means finding strength in the midst of chaos, using adversity as fuel to propel you forward. And sometimes it means taking back the story someone else tried to steal from you. Rachel may have fired me, but she didn't see what came next. None of us ever really do. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, turning endings into beginnings and failures into foundations. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where the next chapter takes me. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities. As my story gained traction, I found myself thrust into the spotlight in ways I'd never imagined. Interviews, speaking engagements, even offers to write a book. It was exhilarating, but also overwhelming. For so long, I'd been defined by what Rachel had taken from me. Now, I was determined to define myself on my own terms. One evening, after a particularly grueling panel discussion, I sat alone in my hotel room, scrolling through social media. The comment section of an article about Rachel's suspension caught my eye. Most were supportive, applauding my courage and calling for systemic change. But one comment stood out, a short message from someone named Anonymous Hope. Asterisk, thank you for speaking up. Your story gave me the strength to confront my own boss. I didn't think anyone would believe me, but now I know I'm not alone. Asterisk. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read those words. This was why I'd done it, not for revenge, not for fame, but to remind others that they weren't powerless, that their voices mattered. In that moment, I realized something profound. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about empowerment, the ripple effect of standing up and saying, enough. A few weeks later, the investigation at Crestline concluded. Rachel was officially terminated, her name tarnished by the scandal. While some might have seen this as the ultimate victory, I felt strangely detached from it all. Her downfall wasn't the point. The system that enabled her behavior was. And dismantling that system would take more than exposing one bad actor. Determined to make lasting change, I partnered with Mia and several other advocates to launch a nonprofit initiative called Workplace Truth. Our mission was simple yet ambitious: to provide resources and support for employees navigating toxic work environments, while pushing for legislative reforms to protect whistleblowers and hold corporations accountable. It wasn't easy. Fundraising was a slog, legal battles dragged on, but every small win kept us going. Meanwhile, my career flourished in unexpected ways. The startup I joined post-Crestline grew rapidly, thanks in part to the exposure generated by my advocacy. Within 2 years, we secured major funding and expanded our team. For the first time in my professional life, I felt truly valued, not just for my ideas, but for who I was as a person. And then there was Daniel. Throughout everything, he remained a steadfast ally, cheering me on during tough times and celebrating my victories like they were his own. Over time, our friendship deepened into something more, grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose. Together, we dreamed of a future where workplaces prioritized integrity over profit, humanity over hierarchy. As for Rachel, she faded into obscurity, resurfacing occasionally in gossip columns or industry whispers. Some speculated she'd landed consulting gigs under assumed names. Others claimed she'd retreated entirely from public life. Whatever her fate, I stopped caring. She no longer held power over me, and that freedom was its own kind of triumph. Years passed and life moved forward. I published a memoir detailing my journey, hoping to inspire others to reclaim their stories. To my surprise, it became a bestseller, sparking conversations about workplace ethics around the globe. Schools invited me to speak to students. Entrepreneurs sought my advice, and strangers approached me on the street to share how my experience had impacted them. Each interaction reinforced my belief that vulnerability could be a catalyst for change. One crisp autumn morning, I received an email from an old colleague at Crestline. Attached was a photo of the company's newly renovated lobby, featuring a plaque commemorating diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Beneath the inscription was a quote attributed to me. Asterisk, justice begins when we refuse to stay silent. Asterisk. I stared at the image for a long time, marveling at how far things had come. Crestline Media wasn't perfect, it likely never would be, but seeing tangible progress gave me hope. Change was possible, however incremental, however hard one. That evening, I met Daniel for dinner at our favorite restaurant. Candlelight flickered across the table as we clinked glasses, savoring the quiet joy of a life well lived. "You've come a long way," he said softly, his gaze steady and warm. "Proud of you doesn't even begin to cover it." I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. For him, for the journey, for the person I'd become. "We both have," I replied. "None of this would have happened without you." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't give me too much credit. You're the one who fought for this, who refused to let them break you." His words lingered in my mind long after the meal ended. He was right, I had fought for this. Not because I wanted to prove anything to Rachel or anyone else, but because I owed it to myself. To the girl who once walked into Crestline with stars in her eyes and dreams in her heart. She deserved a happy ending, and so did I. As we strolled home beneath a canopy of stars, I reflected on the twists and turns that had brought me here. Life hadn't gone according to plan, but maybe that was the beauty of it. Every setback, every betrayal, every moment of doubt had led me to this place, to a version of myself stronger, wiser, and infinitely more resilient than before. Rachel may have stolen my work, fired me, and tried to erase my existence, but she couldn't take away my voice, my truth, my ability to rise above, and in the end, that made all the difference. So here's to second chances, to finding light in the darkest moments, and to rewriting the stories we're told we must live with. Because sometimes the most satisfying endings are the ones we create ourselves.